Hello and welcome, everybody. I am Reverend Meg Biddle, and this is Ministry Mondays with Meg. I'm Meg. Um, I am Reverend Meg Biddle. I serve at the American Baptist Home Mission Societies in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania, and I serve as the National Coordinator for Ministry Life and the American Baptist Personnel Services. Okay, commercial part done. I am joined today by my friend, colleague, Reverend Sarah Strosahl-Kagi, pastor of Royersford Baptist Church. Thank you for joining me, for being my guest.
Oh, thank you for having me here today. I'm very excited to be on Ministry Mondays with Meg.
Right.
You could give like M&Ms away as a promotion.
I should do something like that. I know. It's fun, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's good to be here. So I am Sarah Strosahl-Kagi. I serve as the pastor of Royersford Baptist Church in Royersford, Pennsylvania. Actually, technically, we're in Upper Providence, Pennsylvania, but nobody actually knows that. We found that out when we had to go to zoning for something. And here we are. We are about 30 miles northwest of Philadelphia, for anyone who needs a geography lesson. It's good to be here.
You've been pastor for what, 2 years now?
Just about 2 years. I started in September of 2020.
Okay. Wow. I thought it was getting around that. And then when we worked at ABHMS together for just a little smidgy of time, and then I inherited Sarah's old office, so which is kind of fun. But and fortunately, she saved me a poncho that came in handy one day.
Yes.
But anyway, so you've been at the church for almost 2 years now. Started in the midst of a pandemic.
In the thick of it, yeah.
Right. You went through the whole call process. Oh wow, I didn't think about that. You went through the whole. So was that all online?
Yep, it was all virtual.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so my advice to anyone doing an interview process virtually, the whole joke during when everything was on Zoom was like, you only have to wear a nice shirt. You don't have to worry about your pants. Well, on the night of one of my interviews with the search team, I put on a nice blouse and I had been in my pajama pants because it was the pandemic and I had just had a baby. So like there was no real pants happening. And I thought, I'm going to change out of these pajama pants and just put on some like plain black leggings just to, feel a little more dressed up. And thank God I did, because about midway through the interview, it was evening. So the lights had shifted and I needed to get up and turn a light on. And as I stood up and you could see more of my, not just my blouse, I thought, thank God I didn't have my like Christmas PJ pants on. So, I'll always put, something nice.
Right. A word to the wise, folks.
Yeah, that's my big advice. If you learn nothing else today, take that away.
Right. That's really actually an important takeaway. So going through the process, starting as pastor, I can't imagine what that must have been like.
It was pretty wild because, so full disclosure, I'd also been a member at RBC for about a year prior to becoming pastor, but I had no intention or feeling of ever becoming a pastor, let alone their pastor. So like I tell people that if I had known or felt even a little bit in my heart that was where God was leading, I would have been a much better member. I was a good, I'd show up every so often. I mean, part of that was I was traveling a lot for work and I had a young kid. And so like Sunday mornings are hard. It's just hard. But I wasn't super involved. I didn't know a ton of people. And, so yeah, it didn't really aid me too much, when I took on the pastorate. So there were some people in the congregation that I did not meet in person until June of 2021, when we first came back in person. We were online through June of 2021. And I have to say, the congregation of RBC has been super adaptable and really flexible, and really took well to Zoom and to online ministry. We had a lot of people being involved that way, for which I'm really grateful. But the first Sunday that we were in person, this guy walked in, and I said to my worship coordinator, I said, who's that guy? Because clearly everyone knew who he was, and I'd never seen him before. And she goes, oh, that's so-and-so. He's been on every week. Well, when he was on Zoom, he always sat just off camera from his family. So I didn't know what he looked like. I knew his voice. I knew so much about him, but he sat right over here. So I didn't know what he looked like. Yeah.
How funny is that?
Yeah.
And how interesting that is, that you come in and you've been here now, but you still don't really, not really know anybody.
Yeah.
So as you've come in, been here for a couple of years, you guys have added people sharing the building now, or renting some space and things like that going on?
Yeah. So one of the things coming into this pastorate that I knew about in the interview process, they didn't spring it on me, but pretty much every congregation out there right now, we were facing some financial stresses. And so we'll talk a little bit more about one of the ways that we are approaching that. But one of the things that we saw as sort of an obvious first step was to, use space, rent out space in our building. Again, like so many churches, we have a huge building that's part of it is used on Sunday. And we do have a nursery school that's here during the school year, but they're only here in the mornings. And so we still were left with all this space. And so through several different community meetings and conversations and connections, we found a theater group. It's Firebird Theater. They had been, I believe, at the Colonial Theater in Phoenixville. And they were looking for some office space that they could call their own. And so we had room to spare. So the room that had been used as our choir room, but our choir just rehearses in the sanctuary now. We cleared that out of all the stuff that had been stored there for 100 years and could be moved to a different place or passed on to another group. And they moved in. And so it's just brought, even with that one small change, this one small group, not only is there financial resources that now we are, able to collect rent, but just has brought such a vibrancy, and to have, you pull up on a Thursday night and the parking lot is full because they're rehearsing. And it's primarily children and youth theater. And so we have all these kids and youth now filling our building. They do some rehearsing here. And then once they get closer to their productions, they do those elsewhere. We may get to a point where they do productions here, depending on lots of logistics. But it's really exciting. And the congregation here has a history of, for a while they had their own theater group that produced plays here within the church. So it was really, part of our DNA already to have this type of ministry. And now to have that back has been really, really wonderful for folks.
I think it's fantastic. As churches come back, or figure out what their next step is and how they become, more financially stable, because, things were already stressful before the pandemic. What it is now, I don't know that we're after the pandemic, but just living
this part of the pandemic.
Yes, living this, yes, exactly, this part of the pandemic, to be able to use something that even goes back, to where the church has history. I think that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it was really exciting, and really just felt like a, as our moderator calls it, a spooky God thing. That it was such a, because not that we would rent it out to just anyone. There were probably some groups we would not rent to, but to find something that was so closely aligned with our values and who we are was great.
And did you say there was something else that
There is something
going on. Okay, what else is
so
going on?
the other thing that we are pursuing is creating workforce housing on our property, which we are super excited about. So kind of to back it up 10 steps to how that started, like I said, we were, in a financial situation. What I appreciate about this congregation is that we weren't at the crisis point. We were not at the point where we were going to run out of money tomorrow. But projecting down the line, we could see we were going to hit a wall at some point, and that would be an issue. So as we saw it, we had several options. We could just shut the doors and close, but that didn't really seem like an option. No one was willing to go that route yet anyway. We could cut staff. Obviously, that helps to save money. But again, the congregation said, we're not even going to entertain that option because without staff, we don't have ministry. And that's not to say that the lay folks don't already do so much ministry, but that's why we're here. We have our staff to carry out our mission and ministry, full time while the church is existing in the rest of the world. So, which was to me, that was such an impressive stance to take, because I've seen so many churches that say, all right, we're going to cut the youth program. We're going to cut this. We're going to bring the pastor down to 3/4 time. And they said, no, that's not on the line. Maybe it'll come to that point at some point, but that's like way, way down the list. We said we could rent out some space, and that makes a lot of sense. We also looked at, just selling our property altogether and finding a new place to worship. We have a good chunk of land in a desirable location. We could get a good chunk of money for this. And there were mixed feelings about that, understandably. And so one Sunday, in my sermon, I gave several different scenarios of what church could look like next year, the following year, if we took these different routes. What did it look like, to have a storefront where our offices are, and then we worship in a school gymnasium? Or what does it look like to, totally sell our property and go our separate ways? What does it look like to keep our property, but have other groups meeting with us? And one of the scenarios that I presented was having affordable housing on our property. I'd read some articles about churches that had done that, and I didn't preach it thinking that this was the answer or what we would do. And people latched onto it, and they said, "Oh, that's interesting." So I got in touch with Daniel Pryfogel at Simpara. And Simpara is an organization that works with churches in our situation. So their whole thing is taking churches that have lots of property, lots of resources in that way, and helping them to discern how to use what we have for the greater good, for the good not just of this church community, but of the wider community. And so we worked with Daniel for about 6 months, walking through that discernment of, what we have, what we want to do, what would work with the ethos of our congregation. And through that process, really discovered that the need for workforce housing in our area is astronomical. I can't remember all the exact facts and figures, so please, fact checkers of the internet, don't fact check me on this. But there's something like in Upper Providence, where we are located, there's a need for like 300 units of workforce housing or something along those lines, and there are currently 4.
Can you to explain to people who don't know what workforce housing is,
Right.
what that is?
Workforce housing, the target population of workforce housing would be people who are making between $8 and $16 an hour, who are working in the community. So folks who are working in grocery stores, the folks working at Wawa, teachers, early teachers, nurses and CNAs, pastors, those folks who are working in the community but cannot afford to live in the community. And I mean, Meg, you and I were just talking about this earlier in terms of finding housing in our area. And prices here are high, but not as high as in some parts of the country. And you and I, we are both gainfully employed people. And to find a place that we can afford to live with our families it's crazy how difficult that is. And we're making a lot more than a lot of people in the community, which is, it just blows my mind when I think about that. I don't know how people are doing it, especially people with children. Forget it. Like, it's just not.
It just comes out down to what you're giving up is, but then you get to the point where you can't give up anymore. But so that's the whole idea, is to provide. So is it for families then? Is that the idea?
Yeah. So when we first started looking at, I mean, obviously families would be our like number one that we would love to provide for. And we're on the same road as the middle school and high school here in the Springford School District. Some of that comes down to terms of space. So when we decided that, yes, this was the route that we wanted to go, we saw this great need in our community, and we have the resources. We don't have the financial resources, but we have the land. And so it sort of becomes the perfect marriage of, we found a developer to work with, and the developer that we're actually working with is called Church Housing Corp out of Chester County, Pennsylvania. And they started out of the Episcopal Church in Phoenixville, who built affordable housing in their parking lot in the early 80s. And so at their core of their values and their history is church ministry in this way. And since then, they have several developments in other places in the area. But this sort of helps them come back to their roots by working with a congregation. So we haven't worked out the details, either purchase a plot of our land or do some sort of a land lease situation. They're because they're a nonprofit too, they're not able to pay market rate, but they are able to pay something that will give us financial sustainability. And then they manage all of the rest. So we are just here to be the cheerleader. We're here to provide the land and be the cheerleaders. And, so if there needs to be someone speaking at a zoning meeting saying, yes, we believe in this project and this is why, we're the ones who show up for that. But we don't have to contact the contractors and, deal, with the zoning stuff, and figuring out that and the legal stuff. And then once the units are built, Church Housing Corp continues to manage it. And they're somewhat unique in that they, for all of their buildings, they have, a building manager and a facilities person, a maintenance person, and a social worker on site. Because they really believe it's not just about providing housing, but, all of the things that go along with that. So they give the example of one of their units specializes, it's specifically for seniors who need affordable housing. And they said 99% of the time what their social worker is doing is helping people program their television remotes. But also they're there to help people get benefits when they're unable to figure out that system. Another unit might focus on, young adults who are in their first apartment, moving out of home or whatever. So the social worker then might be teaching them how to turn off the water on their toilet when, they got to do that. So all of those things that go along with living in our world, that you need that little extra support for. So we're really excited that they are, they sort of see the holistic piece of it, not just, all right, put them in a building and call it done. So what we're looking at is figuring out how many, what exactly we can fit here. And most likely it will be studio, 1 bedroom, 2 bedrooms. So small families, single folks, couples, that kind of thing. So we're really excited to see where this leads, and just to put in action, like, what does Jesus call us to do? Right? Like, do not store up your treasures, people. Don't just sit on this big piece of land.
I think it's fantastic that, that the church goes, okay, so what are we going to do? And that even though, because I mean, with the real estate where we live, Lord knows you could get a lot
Yeah. Yeah.
for that land, but recognizes the benefit in working with not just anyone, people that are really going to meet the needs of the people. So I love that it all comes.
Yeah.
I love that it all comes together like that. So you
Oh,
guys
yeah.
are just really in the beginning stages of everything.
Yeah, so we voted. It was actually back in January that we voted, and you know, going through this process, we included we had a small team that was working with Simpara, but then we met in small groups with the congregation. We did, we kept people informed and spoke with people all along the way. So when it came time to vote, we were pretty certain it was going to pass, but you never know with church, and you never know. And so I was that whole Sunday morning, I was just like, all right, what's going to happen? And it was a unanimous vote. There
Oh,
was
wonderful.
hardly any discussion. I think the only discussion was, all right, like, let's do this. This is great. And which I knew people were excited, but to know everyone was like on board, was just, I mean, again, it was just a God thing. Like, that's not us, that's God working in people's hearts. So when we voted, and now we are the developers working on some drawings. They kind of have to follow, because they find all the funding for it, for the building. So they have to work on the schedule of when they can get the funding they need. So we were, there just wasn't quite enough time to get on like this cycle of funding, whatever that was. So we're getting drawings now, and depending on how things go, may break ground next year. But yeah, so we're still continuing to educate ourselves about the housing issues and housing insecurity, and what we can do, and what are the needs beyond just housing, and so what would it look like to have a counselor share an office in our building? What would it look like to have, another social worker, or some sort of a resource office here? Because we have to care for people's whole bodies. It's not just about Sunday morning. It's not just about caring for their soul. It's about caring for the whole person.
Yeah, which is, as you're saying, is just so important. And man, I just wish other churches would get that, that, okay, we don't have to just roll up, I get it. Yeah, the cost effectiveness to maintain this building, but if we're so, emotionally invested in this building, what else can we do? And here's this opportunity to and to dream, and that there's that permission giving, from the congregation,
Yeah.
to allow those dreams to happen. So do you guys get any say at all in what happens in that?
Yeah, so we will approve the drawing. So actually they came to us with a first draft drawing, and we were like, okay, let's tweak some of these things a bit. So we do get some say. I mean, if we're too picky, they might not want to work with us anymore.
Right.
But yeah, so we do get a say in that. And one of the things that we love about this partner too is that they really see this as a partnership. And they get church. And so, like, as we were trying to discern if we could get in this first round of funding, they were like, listen, we want you all in, and we don't want to pressure you. So take your time. And if you need the time, that's fine. We'll catch up with you, on the next round. So it just feels like such a good fit. And I mean, it's terrifying too. Like, let's be honest. I've lost sleep several nights about this, and probably will continue to until, and even well after it is built, because it's so different. And there are churches that have done this before us, and so I've been in touch with those folks, and that was part of our process too, was learning from people who have walked this path before us. there's so many unknowns, which is absolutely terrifying. But at the same time, there is this calmness and this peacefulness that our congregation and myself that we feel with this project that can only be described as the hand of God at work. I mean, like there, that sort of, I mean, just the fact that I'm their pastor here, like that's a whole story that's weird too. Like God works, and when we are willing to open ourselves to the possibilities, amazing things happen. I mean, look, here I am. That's a testament to letting go of any preconceived anything.
So as you found yourself in a role that you never imagined, because I remember the first time I ever met you, that was one thing that you were clear about, was that you didn't think you'd ever pastor, not on your radar.
No way.
So now as you found yourself in this spot where you thought that you'd never be, because God indeed has a sense of humor, and God's dreams are so much bigger than anything that we can fathom, and you're living in all of this. um so where do you find hope for the future of the church?
I'll be honest, there are days where I don't.
That's important.
There are days where I'm very concerned, but I find hope in, honestly, I find hope in congregations like RBC that, for all intents and purposes, is very traditional congregation. I mean, you've seen our congregation. You walk in, it looks like any kind of mainline church. A lot of gray hairs, a lot of really well-intentioned folks. But we sing the traditional stuff, and our service looks pretty traditional, but there's such an appetite for innovation within this congregation, and such a desire to serve God. And I think that they understand that in this day and age, serving God means we have to think way outside the box. And it gives me so much hope when I see our, 80-year-old church members pouring themselves into learning about affordable housing and advocating for this type of work, and saying, yeah, this is something that's totally outside of what we've done, but this is what we have to do. They blow my mind. They're more open to change than I am, honestly. Like, which is so not a church thing, but that gives me a lot of hope. And when I tell people about this project and they get excited, and think like, oh, we could do something like that. I'm not saying that every church needs to, sell off a portion of their land for housing, but we can think big. I think so often in the church today, we have this mentality of scarcity, because it's scarce, because their budgets are shrinking, and the needs are growing. But if we believe in a God of abundance, it comes to fruition. It really does. And when we put ourselves in the back seat for a second, it's amazing to see. And so I am really hopeful. I am hopeful that people will continue to innovate, and church is not going to look like it once did, and that's okay. And some churches can look like that, and that's okay. But we're going to keep working at it. And there's so many people who are in this boat. And when I remember that, and that maybe we don't outnumber I can't get in trouble by naming the other groups out there, but but we are a mighty, faithful, and creative group. And that brings me hope.
Yeah. So before we end, because I know we can talk forever, I do want to make sure that I share the website address, the rbcabc.org, and plug the church that people can come and join online, in person.
Yes, we are online every week also, which has been a byproduct of the pandemic that I'm really grateful for. So we have some folks who exclusively worship online. We have people who live far away who have reconnected with us because of our online presence, which is exciting. And maybe check out our website in a month or so when our update is hopefully done.
Yeah.
I'm talking to our tech person right now.
So my final question is the one that I ask everybody, and it's similar to the hope question. It's the joy question. So joy. So where in all that you do as mom, as wife, as pastor, Sarah, where do you find joy?
This is huge because I am I try to be a joyful person. I try to be a fun person. And so when things stop being fun, not that everything has to be fun, but like when the bad days are outnumbering the good, like then it's time to move on. That's my cue. So joy is very important for me to find and cultivate. I think on the day-to-day, the biggest place I find that is with my family, with my kids and my pets. On most days, not every day is a joyful day when you have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, but yeah, that they bring me a lot of joy. My little brood of rescue pets bring me a lot of joy. We just acquired another guinea pig this weekend. So
another one?
Yeah. This one we for those of you who are watching, we found a guinea pig last year in our neighbor's yard and adopted him, Peaches. But guinea pigs are best in pairs, we have learned. And so the SPCA recently had a guinea pig who was also found on the streets. So we have adopted him. Thor is his name. So Thor and Peaches are 2 street pigs who will hang out together. And then we have Janet the cat, who was also found on the streets, and Stout the dog, yes, who was rescued from a shelter, never spent time on the streets, but he tries to like fit in with the other animals. So that's where I get a lot of joy. My kids, Asher and Ellie, and yeah, just I don't know.
No, that's the perfect answer.
That's the perfect answer. Yeah. I'm going to visit my best friends from college this weekend. We're going camping, and we do it once a year, and that brings me joy throughout the year. Looking forward to that, and yeah.
No, that's perfect. I mean, no one can watch now Ministry Mondays with Meg and say I haven't learned something, because one, we've learned about the housing, which is phenomenal, but we've also learned that guinea pigs work best in pairs.
I mean, and there's a sermon there about relationship and teamwork, and
right.
You better believe Peaches and Thor and that the resilience of these guinea pigs to survive on the streets of Pottstown, Pennsylvania.
Right. And this is what happens when you do the pastor thing. You're like, there's a sermon and I was watching Buzz Lightyear this weekend, and I was like, ooh, I could use that. Kids, kind of. That's what happens.
It's what happens.
And it's beautiful and lovely and messy. But we're grateful for all of it.
Yeah, that's what life is.
And I'm grateful for you and your ministry, and your congregation. I'm not just saying this because they may be watching and because I'll be there Sunday, but because they are lovely, lovely people.
They're really special.
Yeah.
I tell people that they're like a unicorn congregation because they're so like I've said, they're so unique, and yeah, they really are. They're a special group. And I know we should probably wrap up because I'm getting hungry, but one more story, just that we had mentioned that I never felt called to pastoral ministry, and I still don't know if I am. I don't know that I'm called to be a pastor for my career. I know I am called to be the pastor of this congregation at this time. What comes next, I don't know. But this congregation, this moment in time, is where God wanted me to be, and where I'm happy to be, and most days joyful to be. So it's a good thing.
It's a beautiful thing. Well, I appreciate you. I appreciate the ministry that you have, and the good people that you have the opportunity to work with, and how you're working in and not just for the community. Like, here, we're doing all these things for you. No, this is us with. I really appreciate that when congregations just get that and have that kind of heart. So thank you again for sharing time with me.
Thank you.
And blessings to you. And we thank everybody for watching us, and catch us again next Monday. And I don't know who my guest is yet, but
It's gonna be someone great.
it will be somebody fabulous, just like this week. So we thank everybody for watching us.
Thank you.